Hey there riders, Journo Kris here today. I have got the MotoHub CL500 demo bike. This is the new Honda Scrambler, and as I own a Svartpilen 401, apart from doing a review on the bike, I thought I'd do a really quick comparison between this bike, the CL500, and my Svartpilen 401 to kind of highlight the differences between the two and which of these bikes may be for you, because they are very different takes on the Scrambler. And while people are going to argue over what's a true Scrambler, I think at the end of the day, all that really matters is that you pick a bike that's going to suit you. Now, the Svartpilen 401 is undeniably a roadster with a little bit of the Scrambler kind of styling and elements to it. The CL500 is undeniably a cruiser, which has then been converted into a Scrambler with perhaps a kind of less serious set of modifications. I'll say on the styling side of things, the CL500 is a real looker, but that's quite subjective. It lacks the spoked wheels of the Svartpilen 401, but it has the 19-inch front wheel. It's got the nice tall exhaust, which is more of a styling thing and does add to the weight, where on the Svartpilen 401, that's a taller machine. It's a lot more road orientated. It's a lot sportier. And the CL500 is a much more relaxed, again, quite cruiser themed option. And as a result, I think the characters of the two bikes are quite different. If you want quite a sporty, frenetic, high revving Scrambler option, which kind of has the dual purpose tires and will do that to a small extent, Svartpilen 401 is the clear winner there. If you want something a little bit more relaxed, a lower seat height, a lower center of gravity, a little bit more inviting as a rider, and you're a bit more relaxed in your riding style, and you enjoy just kind of going out and cruising a bit more, I think the CL500 is going to be the winner there. The parallel twin is more refined, it's more torquey than the single in the Svartpilen 401, and as a result, I would probably lean towards this power plant. I do like the Svartpilen 401 sportiness sometimes, but I think the extra refinement and the more mid-range torque, which is a little bit more accessible as far as the performance, does make this a nice bike. And certainly this cruises on the freeway a little bit better than the Svartpilen 401 in my mind as far as that engine performance. The taller front end was something I noticed jumping on the freeway to start off with, but within a minute I was used to it. And I'd say while I noticed the wind, I feel a little bit more than even on the Svartpilen 401, this thing will certainly do the highway Ks with no real issues whatsoever. The dual purpose tires on this as compared to the Svartpilen 401, these on the road, actually, I feel like I prefer them a little bit. They're not as knobby as the Svartpilen 401 standard tires, and also these are tubeless, where you've got tubes on the Svartpilen. As a result, it's easier to basically chuck a little plug in if you do get a flat on these. However, I think for a lot of people, they prefer the spoked wheels on a Scrambler because they feel that's more of the Scrambler theme. But I would probably say between the two bikes, I don't feel like either of them are hardcore enough in the off-roading side of things to really need the spoked wheels, but it is a nice little advantage on that Svartpilen 401, which is probably more a styling thing, which then, you know, is something you've got to trade off against, like the exhaust on this. Both of the bikes are fairly quiet when you're riding them, but this has got a nice little growl when you start the bike up, where the Svartpilen 401 with the stock exhaust is pretty disappointing overall, I would say. And even having put a little collector delete on mine, it's still very, very quiet and pretty uninspiring as far as the exhaust note. Where the Svartpilen 401 is the clear winner is in the braking department. It's got a very sporty braking setup on the front, 4-pot caliper, a big disc, and the rear is a little bit less powerful. And it has a very, very nice braking kind of setup as a result. It's got a powerful front brake setup. It doesn't require much input at all on the front, and it'll bring you up to a stop quite quickly. The CL500, it has a much kind of weaker front brake setup with a lot more of that braking power at the rear, so it's a bit more balanced between front and rear, which is more like a cruiser, which the Rebel 500 is and the CL500 is based on. So that's not surprising, and you'll probably want to use the gearbox as well. It's by no means underwhelming, but it's just a basic brake setup, I would say, in comparison to the Svartpilen 401, which has kind of the class-leading brake setup. And while it probably suits the more relaxed style of this bike overall, and perhaps the riders who'll buy it, I wouldn't mind a little bit more bite, and I'd probably change the brake pads myself if I owned this bike. This has ABS, The Svartpilen 401 has ABS, but it also has off-road ABS. I don't believe that's actually an option on this, which is a little bit disappointing. But again, I don't think this is really a hardcore scrambler. I don't think people are going to be jumping dunes and rocks and logs and things on this. You don't have the ground clearance. It's more of a styling exercise, and it is a seriously cool machine. Keeping in mind, I think most people on a Svartpilen 401 are probably doing 95% road anyway, so there's not that big of a difference between the bikes. But like I said, they're aimed in very different kind of directions. They're at the opposite end of the scrambler spectrum, I guess I would say. Apart from that, this has a 12-litre tank, 25 k's a litre is what I've seen on the dash. So obviously it has quite a large range in comparison to the Svartpilen. Not that the Svartpilen is that bad, it gets quite good fuel economy, but it's only got, I think, a 7.8-litre fuel tank, so it's a lot more limited there. The Svartpilen also has a much taller seat height, much taller. This is a much more inviting machine, and again, it comes back to that relaxed ergonomic, where the Svartpilen is much taller. It's a more compact bike, and the Svartpilen 401 is quite a sporty, fast handling machine. It's a bike that if I ride something else and I jump back on, I'm normally surprised at how quick it turns into the corners, and I kind of got to rein my inputs back in a little bit and take it a little bit easier, where the CL500 is the opposite, because it's, again, based on a cruiser and it's got that Rebel 500 kind of handling characteristic to it. It's got a much rounder kind of turning circle and arc through the corners, and if you do want to tighten up your corners, you will need to show a little bit more input and put a little bit more input in. However, at the same time, it's a beautiful thing to just link all your corners together. It's not as frantic to ride as the Svartpilen 401, and it cruises much more nicely as a result, and the handling characteristic is quite a bit more relaxed, which I gotta say, I actually kind of like that. I think that's, to me, in quite a lot of circumstances, going to be the better everyday ride, where on the Svartpilen 401, that's going to be more suited to someone who likes to really be going at it on the throttle and riding the bike quite a bit harder all the time to get the most out of it. Whereas on this, I think when you're cruising, you are getting the most out of the bike. And certainly that's another point in comparison. On the Svartpilen 401, I'm more likely to be really picking up speed in the straights and then braking hard into the corners, in comparison to this bike, where I'd just be carrying my speed through the corners a lot more, trying to avoid braking too hard before the corners. The bike is quite well supported onto those forks with a bit of braking into the corner. Obviously, you know, trail braking in and stuff like that's no issue whatsoever. But it's a very different handling characteristics to the Svartpilen 401, which is kind of more similar to a sports bike, where this is a little bit more similar to a cruiser, without having that kind of more ungainly cruiser feeling where you're lacking basically cornering clearance and you have to be a lot more restrained. On this, it's closer to a roadster in that regard. So this is kind of somewhere between a cruiser and a roadster. And I'd say the Svartpilen 401 is somewhere between like a sports bike and a roadster as far as being much more aggressive. So quite different characteristics. The Svartpilen 401 obviously has the adjustable suspension, which is a bit of a winner there in some scenarios, but I think the overall setup on the much more basic suspension of the CL500 is actually quite comfortable, maybe a bit more comfortable than the 401. And as a result, kind of for that everyday riding, I really can't see much of an advantage on the 401. I think where the 401 has the advantage is if you're doing a bit more serious off-roading, then you can actually mess around with the suspension quite a bit more to get it somewhere where you want it, because certainly on the Svartpilen 401, those forks bottom out so easily. In the standard settings, you really do need to mess around with them, where when I did a little bit of kind of dirt track on this, I didn't seem to find that to be a problem, where I think this is more the one-size-fits-all suspension, where on the 401, the adjustable suspension gives you the ability to dial it in a bit more. And yeah, it's hard to say where the advantage really lies there. I'd probably guess towards the Svartpilen 401. As far as the overall thoughts between these two bikes, obviously, as I've said, Svartpilen 401, it is a much sportier machine. It is a more aggressive machine. It's going to basically appeal to someone who likes much more frenetic single cylinder and to ride the bike quite hard. The CL500 is going to be the winner for someone who likes a bit more of a cruising kind of style machine, even in the Scrambler style of bike, and is a little bit more relaxed, enjoys lots of torque, a more refined engine. And basically, while there are, I guess, strengths on each of these machines, I think the kind of rider they're going to appeal to are quite disparate. They're very different groups of riders. The Svartpilen 401 is probably going to win on value because it's a lot cheaper. And I think also when we talk kind of the performance and spec stakes, as far as people who expect quite a lot more for their money, where the CL500, obviously you're getting Honda reliability, which is a really good thing. You're getting a bit more of a relaxed machine. You're getting a little bit lower of a seat height and a more inviting machine, which is going to be probably a better option for a wider variety of riders, and also for female riders who might be looking for an easier machine to jump onto as their first or an intermediate bike. That's certainly going to be a winner here. And I would actually say the fact that they've taken the Rebel 500 and turned it into a Scrambler is actually a really cool thing. It might not have quite the widespread appeal that the rest of the 500 options have, particularly like the sports bike and the roadster, the CBR 500R and the CB 500F. However, there's definitely a place for this style of bike. And I think if people test it out, they'll be quite impressed. So would I swap my Svartpilen 401 for one of these? Hard to say. I think if they were the same price, it'd be a much harder competition between the two because I do like a more relaxed motorcycle. But as it stands, I'm not going to be rushing out to sell my Svartpilen 401 for a CL500. But I think for the right rider, this might be the winner of those two options, which obviously does mean that for other riders, the Svartpilen 401 is going to be the winner. Only you'll know, and hopefully this has given you a bit of an idea of which might suit you better. Let me know down below in the comments which you think you'd pick. As always, stay safe out there, and thanks for watching. I'll be back soon.